So, this is the introduction frame. There's not really going to be much happening here. It's just the flat JPEG with the avatar that I made like 2 years ago because I'm bad with Photoshop. No audio other than the script dialogue. And overall, it's just a brief description of what is going to be in the rest of the video and the background of how this video was created in the first place. For the most of the basic segment, it's just explaining how certain things in the game work and the camera angle, the gameplay, showing off like the beginning area and how the game looks and feels, and gives an explanation of what might be in the beginning and what goes on later on. This is also part of the basics, but it's also more just in-depth about the hats itself, which is the main game mechanic, and less about like the other gameplay or just how it looks and how it plays and how I feel about the game. And more just focuses on certain hats, more specifically the optional ones, since the other ones don't really have any relevance to the basic right now. This one is just explaining the first, or not explain, but it's showing off the first area, how you got there, and what type of things you'll expect and how it looks. And then it moves on to the boss fight, where the story shows off its antagonist hero, kind of, and shows off the first boss fight, and explain how things goes from there. This part is where it just goes through the second chapter of the game in all 4 of the submissions. More just taking short clips when each are mentioned. Some have longer, and some have more influence over the other ones. While this explains more of just the music in the game in general, and also the boss fight for that chapter, and how I feel about it. This is the overview of the 3rd chapter, Subcon, and also its several different missions, but more or less focused on how the area itself looks and Vanessa's manner and how it's creepy, which then moves on to the boss fight with Snatcher and giving some brief description of what happens there and what happens afterwards and how the fight ends and how Snatcher reacts. Then it moves on to Alpine, where it's somewhat of a brief explanation of each of the 4 areas, but mostly me just expressing my disappointment in this being a free roam when it's not really, and it's just very annoying to traverse. And this more goes into how I don't really enjoy the feel of this map and explaining this compared to something like Subcon, how this isn't the same exact formula, and just showing the final chapter of this map. This is the Arctic Cruise segment, which explains the first 2 acts of the cruise, which it's a short level, but there's a lot of interesting things that happen in the second chapter, which it's a large ship, lots of chores to do, so you're running back and forth, and despite it being ships with narrow corridors, it can be easy to get lost with how tall it is and how many corridors there are, and you have to kind of figure out or memorize which areas lead to which, how to get to where, and just keep track of everything at once. This is the ending part of that segment where everything crashes, everything's out of madness. Hat Kid recreates Titanic, so Hat Kid has to go in there and save everything, and just shows off like, maybe having a kid get near the controls isn't a good idea. Who would have thought? But that doesn't matter because you get a timepiece anyway, so win-win for nobody. This goes over the Yakuza Metro, which is just a giant subway section, and it shows off several parts of the subway, mostly just the yellow line, but each subway part is cut off by different colors, and each color has its own timepiece and collectible. And it shows how there's different alleyways, but then there's also the large subway segments where you have to hop from train to train to get to safety. And that you're not really fully in control of what you collect, since when you collect something, it's immediately taken from you. And this is what happens when Hat Kid tries to steal from the Yakuza, which of course would never go well. Hat Kid managed to escape, but barely, since the boss is dumb and forgot that they have payroll police on their thing. On the final segment, it shows off, or the final chapter segment, it shows off the castle with the stupid Publix ticket line and the money going there with its thing. And shows like the gauntlet, the castle, how it looked when Mustache Girl changed everything. And here is a very low-res image, because for some reason OBS is bad, of the final boss, which goes through that segment. Once the final boss, or shows how they help you beat the boss, and once the boss is over, how the story ends and concludes with you either not helping or helping Mustache Girl by giving them a timepiece, and how all the villains, in quotes, helps you, or asks for you to stay, but you can't. And then it moves on to the Death Wish segment, which is the overview of, oh hey, it's this segment of the game with a bunch of different challenges, which lets you test the game's mechanics in new different ways by either doing time trials of old time riffs or going to old levels and trying to do things like not jump and or take pictures of enemies. And then there's also the EXE boss fights, where you have to fight the old bosses but in new, more brutal ways, which definitely take a lot more tries than the original bosses, which are significantly easier and sometimes pose a challenge, but not really. And if you beat the EX fight, then the original will probably never give you trouble again. Then the final segment goes over the different unlockables, like the tokens, the presents that unlock time rifts, the time rifts themselves, some like optional hats. On the Steam version, it gives you DLC, or not DLC. The Steam version gives you access to Workshop, which lets you get modded stuff, which lets you get special levels, special items that you wouldn't normally have before, and that unlocks more to the game. And this is the conclusion, where it thanks the viewer for watching, apologize for being such a terrible video, and just generally thankful for anyone that made it that far. And it ends off with a double sign out, one that signs off the video and then one that signs out after promoting Discord, Twitter, and things like that. And that's about it for the storyboard. The not very good storyboard.